case we need.
So good morning, everyone. We are very glad to welcome you here today in the Saudi House for this session on building resilient communities as part of the accredited program of the World Economic Forum. So we are here in the center of Davos, but we also live stream, so thank you for our audience joining us online. So today we are going to speak about building resilient communities. We know that urbanization is continuing to grow, but it's not only about population growth, it's also about all the challenges that comes with it. Pressure on the infrastructure, land resources, environmental pressure and degradation, as well as social inequality, and the challenges of fiscal resources and financial resources. On top of it, we also have the issue related to our global challenge, climate change adaptation, energy demand, migration, and the cities we know they are the best actors positioned to respond to these challenges because they're agile. They can respond to complex situations, they can consult with the population, and they can develop adapted solutions. However, we don't hear them very often on the global scene. They're very absent from the international diplomacy. And so we're very glad to have this session with you today. So I'm Charlotte from the World Economic Forum. I'm representative of the Center for Urban Transformation. So we have three amazing speakers with us today. And I'm going to speak a little about them. First is Tolu. So Tolu is our clinical professor for global public health and sustainable urban development at the University of Cambridge. You're also the CEO and founder of Urban Better, and I really love this organization working in different countries, especially working with the youth and driving community-led initiatives. You're also an ex-Young Global Leader, and you're part of our Global Future Council on Clean Air at the World Economic Forum. Thank you, Tolu, for being with us.
Welcome.
We also have Ben. So Ben has 30 years international experience. You're the Chief Development and Construction Officer of the Royal Commission of Al Ula, and you oversee all the critical infrastructure, construction, and real estate. You hold a degree in architecture from Yale, city planning from MIT, and MBA from the Warwick University. And previously, you were also engaged in the work of Russian real estate in Saudi. And finally, Shankar, the Chief of Town and Country Planning Division of the Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development Authority. So you have a distinguished career in urban planning and development, and especially with the initiative as a Miti River rejuvenation that I hope we are going to speak about. Strong academic background, of course, in engineering and urban planning, and you're also recognized by several prestigious awards for your work on transit-oriented development and sustainability.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you for being here. So let's start with inclusive development, our first topic. So we all know that inclusive development is the cornerstone of any urban planning. We all aspire to this, but it's very hard to maintain. It's really hard to integrate in the different aspects of the social policies, the strategic planning, and different initiatives that we can have in cities. So Tolu, first, I'm turning to you. And I would like to know, how do you define community resilience, and especially in an area where you have so many interaction and different varieties of communities?
Thanks, Charlotte. So I think the first thing to ask, even before defining it, when we talk about inclusive development, is to what end? Mm-hmm. Right? And so that definition of what, how do we know we've got there? What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And from my perspective, I work at the nexus. So we talk about thinking about inclusive urban development to address syndemic. So we talk about the syndemic of health issues, climate issues, and urban hazards, right? Because these are interlinked. Syndemic just means a synergistic approaches, right? So these are interlinked risks, interlinked hazards that the action on the urban environment provides an opportunity to both protect health, to advance climate resilience, and to protect against urban hazards. So I think that's the first thing to note. The second thing is when we talk about resilience, and I have a troubled relationship with the word resilience, and part of the reason is because it is often, so start off with what I think it isn't, right? Yeah. It is often thought about as it's a heuristic for thinking about ability to withstand shocks. Right, and that is very much a reactive form of resilience. But it's really important when we think about community resilience that we're talking about proactive resilience. So I think about four things. One, the access to interventions that limit your exposure to these risks. So that's the very first thing, right? So when we're talking about resilience, there are quite a lot of preventable surprises, right? Are we thinking about development to reduce exposure to things like poor air quality, to things like built environments that make it difficult to be physically active, to interventions that make it difficult for people to access healthy food. So these are some of the syndemic type exposures that we have to think about how to limit the risks associated with that. The second is the ability to protect the vulnerable, right? So and reduce vulnerability. There's some inherent vulnerability when we think about urban development from, say, extremes of age, right? But there's also vulnerability that can be reduced when we think about chronic conditions, right? So if we're trying to create healthy, sustainable urban development, a part of it is thinking about the population and thinking, actually, if we're reducing the prevalence of diabetes, of prevalence of obesity, or prevalence of factors that we know actually increase vulnerability in the event of a shock, that is a critical part of creating and embracing community resilience. The third aspect is social connection, right, and social capital. In the event of anticipated shocks and stressors, we know that a really critical part that determines people's ability to come out of that with positive or optimize their outcomes through that relates to the social capital, the connection. And sometimes that is lost when we implement urban interventions that actually break the fabric of the social connection and social capital that already exists. For perfectly, what seem like rational reasons, but a key part of that is understanding, and I can talk about that in the next round, understanding what that social capital is. And the fourth and last point is participation. Participation in how we think about addressing any of those three, limiting exposure, reducing vulnerability, and social cohesion. These are not things that we address by me sitting here with Ben and saying, okay, what are the exposures? Okay, what are the social? Okay, let's address those. If we're not engaging the population in determining what the priorities are, what the concerns are, what the key acupuncture points are, then we miss the opportunity to maximize and optimize the community resilience.
Fascinating. Ben, you're working in a heritage city of 60,000 inhabitants and you aim to reach 150,000. What are the key principles that guide your approach to responsibly develop Alula?
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Let me step back just a bit, if you don't mind, and maybe share a little bit more with the audience about Alula. So, Alula is this hidden gem in the northwestern part of Saudi Arabia. It's a region about the size of Belgium, around 22,000 square kilometers. And the Royal Commission for Alula was set up basically to support the revitalization and development of this region. And we have this incredible privilege at the Royal Commission of not trying to make a place, because it is a place. So if you want to step back, civilizations have been coming and going in this part of the world for almost 7,000 years of recorded human history, and there are even signs of habitation that go back hundreds of thousands of years into the past. So we have this tremendous responsibility of taking this amazing cultural heritage that has left us with incredible archaeological resources. We have cities like Dedan, we have which is mentioned in the Bible multiple times, just as an example. So we have this incredible heritage with these wonderful, wonderful archaeological sites. They're integrated into incredible natural beauty, and I would encourage anyone here who's listening who hasn't seen it, go online, look at the photos. It's one of the most beautiful places that I've seen anywhere in the world. But what that means for us is when these two things come together, we really have what we see as a living museum. So as the Royal Commission, what we believe is that we have this responsibility for bringing this living museum to life. And in order to do that, we have a responsibility for doing that in a way that's right for the residents of the community as it is today. And we're very, very intent on keeping that as a core part of our mission. And as well, making it so that we can welcome the world in to see and experience this, ourselves. I mean, Ao'ola, as I said, has been the home to multiple civilizations over time. It was a key part of trade routes between East and West for the incense trade, and people keep coming back to this area over and over. And it is because it's one of the most special places in the world today. So this living museum is what we're trying to bring forward. And I guess coming back to your original question, we look at a number of pillars when we're thinking about that, and they're things that we constantly come back to within the Royal Commission. And if I wanted to say it very, very simply, we are deeply focused on culture. We are constantly thinking about community. We're concerned about the environment, and obviously we want to make sure that all of this works economically to move things forward. So, and I think I love the way that you phrase this in terms of resilience, Tolu. Resilience for us is not about fixing things or being able to recover when things go wrong. It's about actually getting things right from the very beginning. So, one of the things that we often talk about is the need to get the fundamentals correctly positioned. And that means that we have good, strong clarity on the vision, what we're moving toward. We have really solid master planning and teams that have helped to articulate where it is that we want to be over time. We have what I hope is a fairly resilient real estate strategy to kind of move those elements forward and bring them to life. We've gotten in place fundamental infrastructure. Billions of real have been invested in power, water, flood control, all of these other kinds of issues over time. And those investments are continuing as we go forward. Now, but coupled with that focus on the fundamentals, we keep coming back to the idea within the communities themselves that we need to engage. So we try to engage very deeply in the planning process. And I think many of us who are sitting in the room today from the Royal Commission recognize that while hopefully we're bringing some value to the region, we're actually learning as much from the community as we're providing back to the community. So that two-way feedback has really, really helped in everything that we're doing, from the planning to execution of different kinds of projects. So that feedback, coupled with the flexibility to change, is really, really important. It's wonderful to have master plans that go forward, but those are living documents.
Yeah.
They change and they evolve in response to what we're learning from the community, what we're learning from the world around us. I mean, goodness knows, we're discovering amazing new things in Ao'ola every day in terms of the archaeological heritage. I mean, I've heard from some of the team that focuses on archaeological resources that we have more that has not been discovered than has actually been discovered today. So, as I say, we effectively have this living museum. We look at community, we look at culture. Obviously, on the environmental side, we have an environmental mandate that gets integrated into our planning. It's there in the planning documents, it's in design. We try to set really robust standards. We have lead targets on quite a few of our developments, just to showcase and demonstrate that this is important to us and to the rest of the world. And then on the economic side, as I say, the work that we're doing is bringing billions of dollars of value to the region from tourism and travel, but also from the other industries that are coming up around that. It is more than just tourism and travel, it's a whole supply chain. So I think when we look at this, we see success as developing Ao'ola for the residents of the region, but in the right way, by getting resilience right at the beginning, so that things ideally don't go wrong. Obviously, when they do, we want to be able to respond and be flexible and adjust, but it's getting it right for the residents, but also creating that environment where we can share this absolutely incredible living museum with the rest of the world.
I think we've seen in the previous session that tourism can't be decoupled of urban development strategies, and they work hand in hand together. Shankar, I'm turning to you. I was amazed to read that Mumbai in 1950 was 3 million inhabitants, and in 2023 we are at 21.3 million inhabitants. It makes one of the largest cities in the world, and I would like to know from you, what is your approach of inclusive development in such large city?
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, ma'am. And good morning to all of you. It's been fantastic to be here in the cold weather outside. India, swarm here. So Mumbai, as you know, just trying to put you geographically. We come from India, 140 crores of population, 25 million staying in Mumbai, all coexisting. We talked about resilience. We talked about How do we do inclusive development? I'll come with that. Your question, huge population growth, because Mumbai always has been a magnet for attracting jobs. Economic prosperity along with the population growth are two things which cities are called as engines of economic growth. And when you call us engines of economic growth, when we see that aspirational quotient of every human being is to have more and more things together, he also tries to consume more energy. So Mumbai, or for that matter, India, or for growing developing nations, have a challenge that when we have an economic prosperity path to grow, we have to see that our energy footprint is low and we have to contribute more. That's the first challenge we're trying to do. Second is, if you see Mumbai's geography, we have see on both the sides, and that's why we have to expand on more of the public transport. So as we rightly said, we are going on a huge scale of about 350 kilometers of metro network, which is in under implementation. The size, scale, and speed is humongous. It's about 5 to 6 years we are rolling out entire metro network. We have a big plan on affordable housing. As you rightly said, all this population which migrated from different parts of India and different states for jobs did not get affordable housing. And that created huge land pressure on whatever land were there on public lands went for informal settlements or slums, what we call it. Out of the 25 million, about 10 million people staying in these informal settlements. Now we need to have a plan to bring them all into formal settlements. And that's why government has done an affordable housing plan for this. MMRD is leading that plan. And we recently have done a vision document where we want to have economic master plan of Mumbai, because as the planners say, we have a land use plan. We always have a coastal zone and ecological plan. We also have what is called as transportation plan, but we really don't have an economic vision, economic plan. So we feel that about 140 billion economy today, we want to make it 300 billion in next 5 years. So when we want to grow at about 13% GDP, we have identified the growth drivers. If you identify the growth drivers, affordable housing is one of the major things of that, along with transport, along with jobs, along with the community centers which are going to come up. Along with that, we need also good footpaths, good walkable things, last mile, first mile, public transport, good buildings, good affordable housing, inclusive development, participation ratio from all the things for economic growth, as well as cities to be more livable. And if you're talking about cities to be livable, we have to try the blue and green infrastructure together. So we're focusing on that. You also mentioned when introducing me about talking about rivers. So we are rejuvenating all the rivers. We are 1,800 kilometers of river length in Mumbai metropolitan region, which is about 6,300 square kilometers. And we're talking about that area. Recently, you must have heard about Atal Setu or the Mumbai Trans-Urban Link. We are also having a concept of Mumbai 3.0, because Mumbai is fully dense, about 28,000 people stay per square kilometer. That's huge. Now, if you want to decongest Mumbai, provide job opportunities, provide aspirational quotient for all who are staying in Mumbai, the lower class, the middle class, the higher class, the talent class, all who want to survive in Mumbai. Because Mumbai is a global capital now for attracting financial investments and job of all sorts. And when we think of that, we need a new green city which is coming up now. And in that green city, as you rightly said, we are talking about a good transportation network, walkabilities, first mile, last mile connectivity, affordable housing, job employment coming out of in big thing, logistics parks and data centers all coming up. And this city connected with Mumbai, which is connected by a long 22-kilometer bridge, is then going to have an inclusive development over the region. We also have bullet train connectivity which is coming up. So this infrastructure-led development, along with affordable housing, layered with job creations on all sectors, talent retention, and promoting innovation and startups as Mumbai to retain the talent. That's what the growth story is all about Mumbai. However, we are also having huge emphasis about environment protection, sustainability, energy footprint bringing down, and as well as using maximum renewables in all the energy footprints which we are doing. Plus, we understand and we realize that it's all for the peoples, all 25 million people. So people-centric planning, people-centric projects, people-centric approaches. We have stakeholders conversations at every stage. It's not only at planning, it's planning, execution, maintenance, operation. We have stakeholders operations in there, and it's public-private partnerships. We have different models of working. We'll talk about that if time permits. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you for touching base on the importance of human-centered approach, and also Tolu, when you were speaking about participation, I think it's led us nicely to our next topic about community engagement. For the last 15 years, and I think the the major multilateral development banks and donors have also played a big role into this. Community engagement has been democratized in the urban planning and urban development process, especially in developing countries as well, and that's fantastic. And we see that this leads to more accepted projects. The communities are more involved. The projects are more sustainable. But the question here is how do we ensure that we really engage with all the communities? How do we ensure that the most vulnerable people are actually have a voice or can express themselves in a way that they can be heard? So I would like to start with Tolu, especially because of your work a lot with the various communities. What's your strategies to ensure that all the communities are really considered at the design process, but also after the implementation?
So yeah, thanks, Charlotte. I want to just pick up on two things that have been said, because I'll bring that forward. Ben, I like the way that you talk about place. And I think it's very deliberate. And I think I just want to double click on emphasize that, because space is not making a place has, necessitates that engagement, because it's not just about a building, it's not just about where you live, it's not just about where you work, but place is something that we inherently all know what that means. And I think I just want to emphasize that. And then the other point you just made, Charlotte, around the importance of community engagement and the potential for it to increase acceptability of interventions. I think the other thing that is underappreciated is the potential of that to also unearth hidden demand. Because some things seem undoable, some things seem and particularly when interventions that are trying to be transformative and they're trying to be different, the instinct is, oh well, people are not going to want that. And often there's a vocal minority that emphasizes that point, whereas actually engaging meaningfully can help with that, because it's oh, nobody wants this. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Actually, if you give the space for that, you can amplify what that hidden demand that is not being vocalized. So it's the side point. To get to your question, Charlotte, permit me to use medical lingo here, because my background is medicine, and I talk about still practicing medicine, but my patients are cities. And so we really, when I talk about the kind of urban health work I do, we talk about thinking about how we diagnose what the issues are, the kind of prescriptions, how we see if the patients are taking the medicine, how we surveil and follow up. And these are useful ways of thinking about all the different aspects of informing inclusive development. So I will give two examples of the approach that we have taken in leveraging community engagement in this kind of diagnosis, prescription, surveillance, which you can think of as what matters, what works, and what next, right? So one of the projects that we've been doing for the last few years as part of my work at Cambridge in several cities globally, so in Brazil, in Jamaica, in Cameroon, in Nigeria, so Africa, Caribbean, and Latin America, was trying to understand, going back to this idea of this endemic, it seems like a complex thing, right? Oh, where health and climate and urban meet. But actually, we flipped it around to say, rather than trying to communicate a complex terminology, let's come at it from where people are at. So in that particular project, we engaged people in a method that is called community-based systems dynamics, right? So really understanding is really just understanding what matters, what works, and what now. And through this process, we identify different stakeholders across the community, civil society, private sector, public, youth, etc., to map out the feedback loops of different aspects of their day-to-day that impact their diet and their physical activity, that are at risk for the climate risks in their context, and how the ways that the city informs that or shapes that. And what that did was help us understand from the perspective of the community, what matters? How do you articulate what the issue is? Which is the first part of making something acceptable, right? The narrative matters. And when that narrative comes from the perspective of the lived experience and the lived environment as opposed to the objectively measured, it's so much more powerful. And then asking them, well, what are the drivers? What do you think the drivers of and the points the pathways through which any action should be taken. And things that came up, they differed in different cities. So we use the same method, but apply them in different countries. And that allows you to see, okay, in this city, a critical aspect is collective action, and whatever you do, you have to make sure that you are framing it around that. In another city, it's about engaging some key people and indigenous leaders. In other parts, so it's very varied, and so not applying the same cut and paste approach in different places, but you can apply the same method. And then in looking at what to do about it, they had ideas on, okay, well, whatever you do, well, firstly, these are the priorities in our context. But even if, for whatever reason, you're not able to start with those priorities, whatever you do, it's important to build in this aspect. So in a particular area, it could be ensure that this is at the school level in education, because otherwise, in our communities, it just wouldn't stick. But if you come at it from framing it around our children's health, then that's something that that would stick, and that would be really critical and would get the communities with us. So that's one example of adopting that kind of participation. The other I want to give is from Urban Better, which you mentioned. So is this social ventures, the mission to accelerate healthy, sustainable urban development. And a really critical part of this is what we call precision advocacy. So it's data-driven advocacy, is working with a youth-led approach to generate data using citizen science and using physical activity to understand, to diagnose what the key issues are, to identify what the potential prescriptions are, and to work with them as key partners in following up and seeing what happens. So, tangible example. So we set up the digital infrastructure, so the kind of the citizen science app, the approach to training, the partnership with locally registered civil society organizations, and then we recruit young people, which in a lot of the contexts that we work in Lagos or Accra, it's the majority demographic, right? You know, I don't know if you can say you work with young people when 75% of people are under, you're working with the majority, right? So it's just, that's the first part of inclusion. So we recruit them, and then they get training, you know, they take the training, they're then able to, they're called run leaders, you know, they're then able to say, okay, we're going to identify and partner with, you know, Alula, you say you're developing this new area here. Okay, let's see what some of the key, what are some of the key issues that we see in our public space. Let's design an activation and let's actually collect some data. Let's mobilize people along with us. So they collect photo, audio, video, kind of text data and sensor data. You know, they run with air pollution monitors or they walk with air pollution monitors, and they can compare things. So we teach them kind of critical inquiry as well. So if you're going to say, okay, you're having this intervention, it's like, okay, we're going to measure before, and then we're going to work with you and we're going to measure afterwards, because often the measurement isn't there. So if you give you a tangible example, we did some work in Lagos where they were working on a car-free day, right? And it had different levels of acceptability, right? So, you know, the car, you know, people are like, oh, it's going to disrupt business, it's going to drive business away, etc. And they wanted to know, well, how can we measure, collect data to help us understand what some of the risks are in this area before and during, as a way of showing that there is to unearth the unmet demand for this. So they collected data on the walkability and experience during the car-free day, so when there were no cars there on that day, on the air quality, on some of the green features, and then they did that again when the roads weren't closed. And they could see that you can, and so they actually did their own experiments, and then they reached out to the government to say, this is what we found. we really think that, and we managed to mobilize all these people to come out, and actually a lot of people are for this. More people are for this than you think. Work with us to help amplify this as part of your non-motorized transport policy, as part of creating cycling infrastructure, better walking infrastructure, so that when next you're building, thinking about your urban development, you ensure that you're actually thinking about that the walking infrastructure is actually accessible for key vulnerable populations, that you're thinking about the exposure to these risks. So, and that is starting to shift the power and democratize that participation. So now, in that particular situation, you're having city governments are saying, okay, when we're starting to think about what to do, we will engage with you as critical partners, not just advocacy and just making noise, but actually in generating data and holding us accountable to show that we actually achieve the resilience, achieve the opportunities to create health and accelerate climate resilience in our city.
I think that shows like how community engagement can lead to collective action. So Shankar, can you share with us few examples of like strong community engagement strategies that you have experienced in Mumbai that were maybe innovative and have proven like their efficiency?
Yeah, working in Mumbai is working in dense areas. It's all people all around. And as you said, madam, communities become very critical. They have their own views, their own strong points. They don't want to really move from informal sector to formal sector even, because they're very conveniently located near to their economic centers. So one challenge in Mumbai was when you are executing projects, if you consider my Miti River expansion projects, we had a huge flood in 2005. The deluge of 2005 is 944 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours. Combination with the high tide and the highest rainfall in an urban center of 28,000 people per square kilometer. It's a huge deluge. So we had a vision document, we had an action plan, we had a fact-finding committee, and we all sat together. We thought that the river width had to be expanded. And this river had a character of not flowing throughout the year, but it is an urban river, basically 17 kilometers. It starts from Powai area and meets the Maim area, and it goes beneath the runway of the Mumbai airport and travels to the sea to the Bandra Kurla complex area. But it has a huge graph. If you see, this is the top of the river where you start, the overflowing of the lake start here. It has a huge slope till the area where the airport is, and then you have a plain area passing through Bandra Kurla to meet the sea. And the 6 kilometer always has a high tide and low tide impact because of the sea. And this upstream, because of the topography, doesn't have any impact. And there's a huge settlement all around this. And we want to expand this. About 15,000 families had to be shifted. So we had to talk with them, engage with them, and involve the consultant. We talked about two things. There are two disasters which takes place. One, because you are very close, you are vulnerable yourself. And because you are blocking the flow of the river, you are making the unsustainable development plus what we can say is a disaster possibility upstream. And once the water is let, which is blocked in upstream, it is in downstream. So we have to communicate with three different people. Somebody who is in downstream, somebody in upstream, and somebody in the mainstream of the banks of the river. And when I say the rivers are not perennial, when the river is, there is no rainfall, it's rainfall in 4 months in Mumbai, from June to September end. And when there is no rainfall, there's no runoff. And when there is no runoff, people feel that, oh, this is my land, I can stay here. So people don't stay on the banks of river, we found them on the bed of the river. Because then we have to remove them also. And then we had to use some instruments of Disaster Management Act, and we had to remove them. But what we did is, we surveyed all of them. We told them that no industries, because it was not only housing. They were having small shops, small industries, small kind of businesses, along with those things which were attached to the local communities. And we thought that local communities also said that the employment which was coming for sweeper, drivers, laborers were all coming from them. So shifting them was a tough task. But so what we tried to do is we'll shift them within the 1 kilometer radius into formal segments. So what we did is we did a huge survey. We about 12,000 were found to be eligible. Out of that, we did free housing for all of them. We shifted them. What also brought inclusivity among that was the societies who were working in a not so pleasant environmentally good condition, degrading their own health and degrading the environment together, because they were leaving all the waste material, etc., into the river. The rivers were getting polluted, and the kids were not getting good education. So when they moved formally, We had community centers, the women were working, they were given job employment, the crime went down, the education increased. They started belonging to us. And once after 2 buildings, 3 buildings were constructed, then we had huge response. Everybody came to us and said, okay, if this community is going there, we also want. So lead by example.
Yeah, lead by example.
Providing and preventing are not only 2 things. Be a part of the journey. Be with them. And for a government, you need somebody else from their champion. So we created their own champions. We said that, okay, you are look to be educated. Let us educate you. Let us be your champion. It is your society. Please communicate them. If I go and tell them as a government, it takes a little time to develop because they know whether I'm right, I'm wrong. Maybe I want for my purpose, it's their purpose. As long as the communities understand that it is their purpose, it is getting served, they're getting big house, they're getting a better house, they're getting what most of the women tell that there was marriage issues, there were education issues with the communities because there was no address to them. The moment they got a good house, they got an address, they could get a loan access to financial loan, they could do good businesses, then they could marry the children, they could educate the children. So the entire community started being with us. That's on the riverfront. That's the same which we do with any infrastructure project in Mumbai. Survey, do the measurements, give them proper housing, put them all into inclusive development. We believe that everybody who works for the city is a growth model for the city. He's a part of the city's growth. So nobody is inferior to anybody. Everybody is part of that. The scale is different. The scale is maybe on a different delta from each one. But everybody contributes to the city, and city's land, what we call a land value capture. City's land provides wealth for providing all of them. It's the best planning tool which we can use through FSI, instrument, infrastructure that generates money and helps generate what we call the inclusive development for the city. That's the model which Mumbai is following.
Okay. Thank you very
Thanks,
much. Ben, I wonder in Alula, do you have what's your community engagement strategies and policies in place?
Well, I'll try to make the slight shift from 20 million plus in Mumbai to our slightly different scale of closer to 60,000. Though we are almost the size of Belgium, as I said earlier, in terms of the area of responsibility. But I'd like to pick up a little bit on, first of all, thank you, Tolu, for catching that point about place.
Yeah.
One of the things that we constantly emphasize, I say Aola is a place, but we also look at our larger development strategy from that same perspective. So we don't do projects, we make places. And places are platforms for great experiences. And that's a very, very important thing for us because it means that we're constantly thinking outside of boundaries. Speaking as someone who has done development around the world with different focuses from the level of an architect to the level of an urban planner to thinking about the business perspective and how you work with and support the private sector, it's very easy to get bound down to one perspective only. And real success comes from breaking down the boundaries across all of these different elements. And so when I say we don't do projects, we make places, it's a foundational element of the way that we actually approach things. Because as soon as you start thinking about things beyond the boundaries, you're not thinking about one given hotel that you may want to develop. You're thinking about what's happening in the neighborhood around it. Yeah. That begins to impact the residences as well, and it brings together all of the objectives kind of into one. As soon as you start talking about a place, it becomes very real and very tangible in a way that holds you accountable to making sure that you're doing the right thing. So, and similarly, you said something else that I want to touch on is I maybe share a few examples of some of the things that we've been doing in Aola. And you use the word meaningful engagement. And that also is very, very important because I've done this in different parts of the world, and you can have community engagement, but if it's not meaningful, it actually has a negative effect. Because if you go out and you say you want to listen, you want to learn, and you want to respond, and you don't do that in an open and honest way, and you don't take those learnings in and you incorporate them, you only alienate the communities that you're with. So we try to make sure that we really are having this two-way street. And I'll give you a few examples about kind of how we approach that. We obviously want to make investments in the community. We have a number of different programs that have been implemented. I believe that we have an Aola scholarship program that sent more than 700 of the local students abroad to train internationally, and they've come back to participate in the local community. We have an Al Ula Vibes program, which effectively is trying to support businesses from young local entrepreneurs. We offer office space, training, other kinds of things that help to enable them. I think the last numbers I saw showed that we had generated hundreds of jobs to the region from the local residents. And that's very, very important that it's coming from them. Similarly, we'll have a language institute that's trained, I believe, over 3,000 of the local residents, which helps us in terms of the maturation of the tourism and travel industries, but also helps the local residents. And we have a program called our Humayat program, which focuses on training local residents to be shepherds and stewards for the heritage and the culture in the area. So they actually become active participants, whether it's through active engagement in the travel and tourism industry or just in their day-to-day lives. We make them very conscious of the responsibilities that they have for the cultural and archaeological heritage of the region. And those things are very important. And that's part of what we hope that we can kind of give to Al Ula as a contribution from the Royal Commission. But it also, as I said, we also want that two-way street where we're living and learning from the residents. So part of what we do is focus, for example, on design and creative industries in the region. In fact, I apologize to those of you who are seeing this online, and for those of you who are actually here with us in Davos today, I hope that you'll actually come and visit us in the Saudi House, because we have a display from Al Ula of some of the local creative arts. You know, it's actually quite amazing.
Yes.
You know, this is where we learn from the local population. And you can see over here some of the woven fabrics, wood carving, stone carving, pottery that are actually coming from methods that have been developed over thousands of years in the Al Ula region. So you'll notice if you actually see the displays, there are these wonderful reds, these wonderful browns. Those are actually coming from the materials of the local environment. I mean, there are pigments that get made from ground down stone and integrated in. So it is literally the fabric of the environment being woven into the culture in a way. In fact, one of the things that I learned from a colleague just the other day is that the black that you see in some of the local artwork actually comes from the charred pits of dates that are from the oases that have been at the heart of Al Ula and its success for thousands of years. Those are ground down actually to make the pigments themselves. So you can see this connection between people and their environment is so incredibly visceral when you look at the local arts. And you know, we try to contribute by helping to preserve those things, by helping to create economic opportunities around them. But more than anything, we're learning from the local community by supporting and sponsoring those creative arts. So please come by, actually see some of these things. They're absolutely spectacular. But you know, what I would say really overall is that this focus on kind of creating holistic experiences makes it a two-way street of meaningful engagement. So I think that's a very, very important part for us, is that meaningful engagement is two ways. It means that we contribute back, but also that we listen and learn from the local community. And that engagement means that we help to move things forward for the residents, which is a core focus for us at the Royal Commission. But it also creates more and more experiences and places for people to come and join us in Al Ula as we grow as a global destination.
Thank you very much. And I think that this touch on the point on community empowerment. So when you go from community engagement, you're going to also how can we empower the local community and economies to make them more resilient, which is like the end objective. We don't have a lot of time, but I just would love for you to share your views on how can we create these ecosystems that also help to kind of overcome the issue of fiscal constraints, financial constraints that cities can have, and how can we empower our local communities and economies, especially in 2 minutes each, if possible. Shankar.
Yeah, okay. So, as we rightly put in the proper perspective, in a 2-minute talk you're given to each of us, sustainable finance and sustainable communities are two very interlinked things. And cities provide the right ecosystem for doing that. Because cities create the wealth, everybody contributes to the wealth, and the surplus is generated from one and is distributed amongst all to create the assets for the city to maintain by all. Communities are at the center of all the things, because a happy community can drive a city growth to a much more extent than we think for. So provide for better livability is one thing. finance is something we don't work only on economic angle, IRR, and economic returns, but we also find what is the social value of bringing to the things. Are we adding to the social capital? Are we thinking that the cities are feeling happy, they're feeling better, they're feeling inclusive, that this is happening for them? So once you have the citizens feeling that everything is improving by the city governance for them, then what I feel is cities enhance what is given to them in multiple folds. And then the sustainable financing comes into picture. We have different structural models. Because of short of time, I don't tell. But you can see the feasibility of a project not only from an economics point of view, but the value to bring what is bringing to the city. Some things and some individual projects may not be having a profit or loss only, but they may bring a huge value. Sometimes a park which is not going to be economical value, but it's going to bring a huge value to the entire community. You need to provide that. That's the government should do. It's not only that all the projects which are financially attainable are doable, but what community needs is also required, because the master plan, when you look at the city, it's a city as one ecosystem which adds value to the citizens, and the citizens, once they get the things what they want, will add value to the growth of the city. It's reciprocal, beneficial, and symbiotic nature. Thanks, Charlotte.
So in reflecting on this question, I want to propose an update two terms that we've used. So we talked about, community engagement, community empowerment. I learned a new phrase recently of community enfranchisement. Right? So we all much more familiar with disenfranchisement, right? As a very kind of active, very visceral, but actually enfranchisement captures that it's not something I give you. I don't give you power. Actually you take it and then you make it your own, and it's much more equitable. And then the other is thinking about moving from collective action to collective intelligence. The theme of Davos is thinking about intelligent age, and often that leans towards the technological and the AI, and obviously this is a relevant evolution in our societal development. But the power of collective intelligence is something that shouldn't be neglected. When we're thinking about action, often some of the key barriers is, I mentioned earlier about, people don't understand just how acceptable it is. So kind of the how urgent it is to act for a start, particularly in the context of environmental risks and health risks. So unearthing that. There's very little often measurement. Right, so when we talk about, we want an urban development initiative to be healthier and more, are we measuring? And what does that look like? Do we achieve it? It's not just a process indicator. It needs to be an outcome indicator. And so in thinking about the approaches, I think I would say three key things. One, we need codified participation, right? So this is not just an ad hoc, okay, when we want to engage, we will kind of reach out to you, but actually how we develop mechanisms that codify that participation in day-to-day, in the day-to-day way that the city works, because that is a critical part of a word that we haven't mentioned yet today is trust and building trust, not as an intermittent periodic thing, not a thing that you try to build in moments of crisis, not something you build when you want to get the community to agree to something, but a process that is cultivated, that is earned, and that is sustained. So a really critical part of that is codifying that participation. The second is the power of knowledge capital. I mean, I guess I'm at a university, so I would say this, but I do think the importance of partnership with thinking about knowledge is really critical. Not just a university partnership, but actually, I think you mentioned the word democratized knowledge, and this is why we lean on kind of citizen science and saying, okay, data is not just something generated by quote-unquote experts, because nobody is a better expert of an area than the people living there. So ensuring that they have the ability and they're enfranchised with the ability to be part of that knowledge generation, and for that generation to inform, that knowledge to inform action is really critical. And the third point and final point was what you mentioned earlier, Shankar, is the importance of shared learning and replicable models. Mm-hmm. Because again, in order to drive and show what is push imagination on what is possible. Often these things happen in silos. Even with the same city, you go sitting like, oh, that's not possible, as you said, and then, oh, it happens then. Oh, okay, we want that. So actually creating and ensuring, as we're kind of building these mechanisms, that we're ensuring that there's shared learning within and between cities is absolutely critical.
Ben?
Well, it's hard to follow these a little bit, but I think we're really quite fortunate at the Royal Commission for Aola that we have this very, very clear vision that's been set by Vision 2030 from the highest levels of the Saudi government. And that means that there is this very, very clear direction and incredible support that's coming to us. And what that means is we go around the world more and more, and my family and I have lived and worked in Saudi Arabia for almost 16 years. So we've seen an absolutely incredible transition that's been going on, especially in the last 6 or 7 years. And when we go out, the amount of energy and excitement and dynamism that there is for people to learn more, to come and participate is absolutely fabulous. But that puts a huge responsibility on us as the Royal Commission. And the way I think that, and this is me putting on my real estate development hat, the way that we tend to think about that is that it is placemaking that matters. So what we try to do in our overall development strategy is to be able to say to the market that there's a series of places within the county of Aola that we want to bring to life. And these are the investments that we as the Royal Commission are making in those areas. We're making sure that the power, the water, the critical infrastructure is in place. And then we are also making strategic investments. So as an example, we have Old Town Aola, which is one of the historic villages that's been in the area for hundreds of years, where there is one of the most amazing restorations I've seen anywhere in the world, using authentic mud architecture construction methods, where the team that worked on it actually had to reconstruct some of the technologies and learn again to do things that had been done in the past. But this restoration is absolutely spectacular, and it sits perfectly within the character of the overall environment. So we make these kinds of strategic investments. We recently have opened a Chedi Hotel that's within Saudi Arabia's first UNESCO World Heritage Site in Hegra, which is one of our primary architectural sites. So we have those kinds of strategic investments. We get the fundamentals right, but more importantly, we recognize very clearly that we can't do this on our own. This is not about the Royal Commission coming in and actually doing things. What we're doing is providing the right platform. So when we go out and we engage, whether it's with the community or whether it's with the broader private sector, my goal is to be able to say, these are the places we want to bring to life. These are the investments, very tactical and strategic, that we're making in these different areas. And there are opportunities for you to come and co-invest next to us. So when we sit across the table from members of the private sector, we're able to say, this is an important area. You know we're committed to this area, and you can come and co-invest. It de-risks it from the private sector. It helps to create excitement, and it makes it easier for us to tell that very, very simple story that unites, the residents with what's needed for the growth in the tourism sector, and effectively brings it all together in the way that I'm describing. Because in the end, for us as the Royal Commission, we are not successful if we don't make life better from year to year for the local residents. And at the same time, we have a huge responsibility. As I said, we see Aola as a living museum. Part of what we have to do is to share this living museum with the rest of the world. So I think we're all quite proud of that, and hopefully everyone will see that coming together more and more in the coming years.
Thank you very much, everyone. We are running over time, but it was a great honor to be with you, to learn about that's finally building resilient communities is like placemaking, is like tailor-made approach that's engaged with local communities, ensuring we are not doing one fit-for-all approach, and hearing what the people are saying to us. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much. Thanks, Ben. Thank you very much.